Jay Shrek, welcome to another edition of Finish Strong Podcast, a spiritual solution in a world of crisis. And I'm here with C.H. Smith, Charlie Smith. Charlie, what is up today? How are you doing today?
Jay Shrek, it's an exciting day.
It
Ready
is
for another great podcast here.
Man, is there enough information in the world today to have something to chat about?
Oh, I feel like we have a year's worth of content in 1 week, but we're gonna nail it. We're gonna get straight to the point here, but it's gonna be good.
Every time you turn on any sort of information station, whether that be some type of network news or social media, man, it's everywhere. I mean, I've never experienced this much stuff going on ever at any time that I can recall in the last, I don't know, 10 years, maybe. I don't know. Everything's happening and it's happening fast. Do you feel confident and comfortable about what's going on right now in the world today?
I don't know. It does feel a little bit about what this podcast is about, which is a world in chaos, world in crisis. So it's really good. Hey, I also wanted to welcome, since we're the world's first podcast that uses Grok as our co-host, which is sponsored by XAI. So we're using AI incorporated into our podcast, and I think that's what it makes it really exciting is going live with Grok here as well. Hey, I also want to do a special shout out to my wife, KKS, out there halfway around the world doing good work. Serving people, and I just want to recognize that she's been having troubles trying to get back, so she's been gone for about 2 weeks.
Well, salute to her. And it is the spiritual solution is service, correct? I mean, I would put that out there anyway. So my hat's off to anybody out there that's in the world of service, trying to help their fellow human beings, and that's definitely admirable. And a shout out to her. So we're talking about Gronk. What is trending on X right now, Charlie? What's going on X that we need to know about?
Yeah. So if you've been on the podcast, we don't hold you hostage here. So we're gonna go through. We're gonna talk about what's trending on X. We're also gonna talk about. We've got some really good stuff here. Since this is the Finish Strong podcast, we're gonna talk about Joe Biden. Did he finish strong? Yes or no? And then we have kind of a mystery bonus thing that we're going to talk about here on the Finish podcast. So stay dialed in. We're going to go fast and furious, and let's jump into it. Hey, so
let's go.
Here we go. Jeff, trending on X this week. We have, here's a story. We have CNN that said they're going to lay off 6% of their workforce, not necessarily as a result of the election. It could be part of it. I don't know. This was announced after the election in November, so there was some, let's call it not official stuff, but we know now 6% of the workforce. NBC is also doing some cost reductions as well, realigning their workforce. So it looks like there's a trend in the media that they're making some adjustments. What say you, Jeff? What's your take on that?
Big media is done. It's gone. Shut off the lights. It's over. We're going to get our digital content elsewhere, and it's not going to be on those media outlets that used to be that used to be the mainstay of America, was Walter Cronkite, that kind of stuff, right? Those kind of guys in our life. And it's gone. It's done. The print is done. Papers are gone. I mean, all that. And if these companies, regardless of what their content is, are not getting stuff that people want to see and hear, I pull a plug on big media. It's over with. I think it's done. I even think Fox, CNN, all those news sources are going to be going by the wayside. That's my opinion, Charlie.
No, I mean, that's a great point. If you go back to our podcast last week, we went through some of the views from some Joe Rogan podcasts, and the Donald Trump podcast was 170 million views. And that compared to the Super Bowl, which is 124 million views, which is like out of this world, right? Nothing compares in this world compared to the Super Bowl as far as views. So it really tells you that there is a trend, whether it's a trend as far as where the media is shifting, as well as could be the narrative is shifting, as we've seen, and we'll get into some of this oligarchy talk later on, as far as what's being communicated and what the American public wants.
Well, big media is dead. And I mean, business is business. It doesn't have to be whatever the content is. It doesn't have to be pro one side or the other. But the reality of it is it's done. And anybody in those positions, if I'm running CNN, for example, and I look at a podcast like Joe Rogan and I see that his average content receives, 7 million views, and I'm not even pulling 500,000 per show. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to figure out that what we're doing is wrong, and it is. And imagine the amount of people it takes to run a CNN or a Fox when Joe Rogan can go out there with a handful of people and garner 37 million views on a video and have that much power. Those guys are, but why does it take them so long to pull their heads out to realize that our audience is not growing and we're not getting our share of the market? I mean, that's just business. That's not even what they're about or what their news station is. It's all of them right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. You just triggered a thought for me that big organizations, whether it's media outlets and so forth, always are slow to move that big ship. So when you think of going to the internet, right? They weren't posting on there. They were still stuck to the TV, and then it was shifting to social media. Tough to go there, right? Now it's more of this real-time media on X, and shifting to get their information there as well, podcasts, etc. So it's an incredible piece. Going on to the number 2 topic here, Jeff. This is the hot one.
What is it? What is it, Charlie? I'm excited.
Tariffs.
So
what's your take on tariffs?
The most beautiful word in the English language is tariffs. Next to God, country, and love is tariffs. I heard that. That's a horrible Donald Trump.
Yeah, you need to work on that.
I've never tried it. I want to say that. Tariffs is the most beautiful word in the English language, Charlie. What else do you need to know?
So what's your take? Let's break down these 3 countries here. We have Canada. Our good friends to the north. We have our good friends to the south, Mexico, and then China. So China. Let's discuss those. What's your take on all 3? Break them down individually.
3 of them. I'll break this down simply and quickly and easily. It has to be a level playing field, regardless of what it is. There's no reason that we should pay more and or less. It should be fair. There's no reason that we should have to pay a tariff or put a tariff on anybody. Bring it in as it is, and you either compete with the market or you don't compete with the market, but you can't tariff us and then not get tariff back. And I don't care which. I think that's a universal answer to all of it. There shouldn't be tariffs either way, right? There shouldn't be, in my opinion. What's your take?
Well, I think what you're saying is equal playing field, fair and balance, and that you're a free trade person, right? You don't want to close up our borders. I think for me, it's very interesting. With Trump specifically, I think he always has an angle. I mean, he is a negotiator. So everybody jumps all over this. I don't think it was as bad as the first time, right? Where there's, everybody is like, every time he says something, he thinks that's what he's doing. Like he's saying something, but he has an end result in mind that's different than what we interpret. He's thought through this stuff. Have you seen all the executive orders that came out? We're not going to get into those, but like there is a method to the madness now that we're 8 years into this, as far as Trump being in politics and so forth. So for specifically Canada and Mexico, I know he's talking about drugs being the narrative. The what I'm reading is some people are saying that he wants to renegotiate. What is it? The USMCA, which formerly NAFTA. I may have got that acronym wrong. I've also heard, as far as Canada specifically, is he cannot stand the Liberal Party up there, specifically Trudeau. So Trudeau's gone. Maybe that'll change. And so it'll be interesting, the shift that potentially will take place as they try to get a new prime minister up there. Mexico is a little bit different. I don't know. I don't have a take on Mexico. I know we needed to close that border. I know that's where most of the drugs are actually flowing through. And then there's I don't have the number right here, but hundreds of thousands of people die from fentanyl overdose and all these illegal drugs coming up through there. So that, I think that's a legit topic. And for me, China, I think it's just a leverage thing. As you know, to your point, we are not treated fairly with China, and China doesn't treat anybody fairly. I mean, it's a communist China party for a reason. The biggest issue there, specifically to China, is that if you want to do business and you're a U.S. company or another company that wants to do business in China, you have to form a joint venture with the China company. And that once you form that JV or that joint venture, then now everything that you're doing, whether it's your intellectual properties, whatever it is, you've basically handed a lot of that over to the joint venture and what you're doing specifically. And when you hand that over in the law in China, that basically the communist government can have access to anything that's going on with any company. So I don't know how that's a fair playing field, but that's my take on these tariffs. But you had a really good
quick story, Charlie. I don't know if you realize this, that Phoenix, Arizona, which we are from, has one of the largest populations of Canadians here that come visit us during the winter because they have enough sense to get out of Canada during the winter, and they come here. And so you get to know a lot of Canadian people, and you get to know them, right? And what you realize is they said that there's going to be a tariff going in on bourbon into the country of Canada, and that they were going to eliminate drinking it. And the only thing I can tell you is they will not eliminate drinking alcohol in Canada, regardless of what the tariff is, just like we're not going to quit buying cigarettes here, regardless of what the taxes are. So we don't have to worry about that. Jack Daniels does not have to fret that he will not be able to send booze over the border, because my Canadian friends are not going to stop drinking regardless of what the tariffs are on them. And that's my take on that.
I'm just wondering what Grok has to say about that specific topic, since you're talking about bourbon there. What I'm showing is Alcoa, energy, automotive is an issue. Canadian Goose. Those big jackets, they're very popular, and it's like $1,200 for a jacket. Oh yeah, Constellation Brand, Modella, Corona, which is basically a U.S. company, bourbon, that could be bad.
They're not going to stop.
The state of Kentucky
really matter. I mean, seriously, if you think about this common sense wise, you see there's a disparity between the economy of Mexico and United States, but not when you look at Canada and you look at the United States, right? We live fairly similar, right? And there's no reason why their products should come in and be tariffed or vice versa. That should be a quick, easy one. Yeah, it's a little more complicated in Mexico, but not as much, because a lot of those companies that are shipping stuff back out of here are U.S. companies that have left the United States and manufactured in New Mexico, or not Mexico, right? But when you get to China, that's a whole different deal in China. I get that because it's a completely different structure. But those two we should be able to figure something out that should be easy and good for both of us. I mean, that should be a quick and easy fix, I think.
Well, hopefully it is. Hopefully it is. We don't want the stock market to tank and people to be affected, but I'm sure it'll all work out. It's lots of noise. Hey, shifting gears here. There's a micro event that happened in a great country. I'd love to go to this country, in Argentina. And that is President Milei down there has done some wonderful things that we're looking to follow as far as, and he's a libertarian, is austerity, or let's say getting out of the deficit, getting out of the red as a country, which, you know, we are trillions and trillions of dollars, to getting in the black. And last month, Argentina, which, you know, they've had hyperinflation and all sorts of crazy stuff for years and years and years, decades, they actually went in the black, which I think that's pretty darn impressive, right? Because he's changed a total culture that was heavily socialism and turned it into you know, a country that is prosperous now, at least managing its debt. So he was recently, Jeff, Jay Shrek, at Davos. Davos is going on this week. And for the people that don't know who Davos is, it's actually in Switzerland, a small town in Switzerland. And that's where the World Economic Forum, by the way, we should think about doing a podcast at Davos next year and bring some people in, because it's a pretty nice spot there, Jay Shrek.
You know, I'm up for that. Okay, I'm just gonna let you know that real quick. Hate to interrupt you there, but I'm into that. I'm ready.
Yeah, we'll get your skis back on, man. We'll get after it. But I want to read. He had this speech yesterday, and he talked about, and this is more, I would say, elitist vibe, academics, all sorts of different type of people. But he delivered a speech challenging the term wokeism and criticized modern ideologies such as radical feminism, environmentalism, and social justice. And he said these are just terms that drive socialism, and that hasn't worked for them. What's your take on that? And by the way, Jeff, doesn't he look a little bit like Elvis from Argentina? A little bit. He's got a good looking vibe going.
You know what I like is this, Charlie. It proves that if you have a little bit of common sense, hey, I don't care what your lifestyle is. You can do whatever you want to do. And I think the basic people in the United States of America believe that if you want to live a alternative lifestyle, regardless of what that is, whatever that means, and you do it in your own house and you live your life the way you want to live it, nobody cares. And that's the big deal. It's not, there's a lot of people that are fearful today that have alternative lifestyles, thinking that, this new group is going to, throw hate at them. And that's just that's the big media pushing an agenda that's crap. Nobody needs special treatment. If you are who you are and you're true to your own self, who cares? And nobody does. Nobody cares. And so when you push that agenda, whether it's in the United States or it's in Paris, France, or it's in Argentina, and you push this alternative lifestyle and all this stuff, all it does is, in a spiritual solution, I look at two things, right? Does it unify or does it divide? And wokeness divides. It doesn't unify. It pushes people out, because we believe that you can live whatever lifestyle in this country. I don't care what my neighbors are. That does not affect me, right? But to force me to have to change my philosophies, my morals, and all those different things to fit a small group of people, I wouldn't want them changing for me if I had some alternative style of life. Let's just say I was addicted to guitars, which I have a bunch of guitars. You shouldn't hold that against me, but you don't need to put a sign on the front of my house that says he loves Gibson and Martins, right? It doesn't matter. That's my choice, right? And the NAMM show is going on in LA, where all the new guitars are at. Just to throw that in there, Charlie, to let you know that not everything in LA is on fire.
So I don't know anything about guitars. Les Paul, Gibson. Is that what it's
Yeah.
called? Gibson. Fender. Yeah, I know a couple of them, but yeah.
Well,
No,
the only reason I throw that up there too is because these companies like Taylor, and there's just a few, it's Caterpillar, it's all these people have taken their factories and they've moved them into different states. They've taken or countries. They've taken them to Canada. They've taken them. And so how do you work that, right? Because we would like to manufacture that stuff there. We're letting all these people in the country that don't have jobs, but we don't manufacture anything anymore. So it's not as easy as I just threw it out there a little bit ago. But hey, the guy in Argentina proves it though. If you just have a basic common sense philosophy and you don't spend more than you make, then probably you can balance your budget, whether it's your house or you're a country.
well, like I think we break this down a little bit of common sense here. I always think like, what's the money behind a narrative? And I was thinking of that quote I saw on X by I can't think of his name, but he's from the alternative party to the liberal party, and he was quoted and he was being interviewed, and he said, "Hey, what's your take on what Donald Trump did with declaring male and female as the only genders?" And then his response was classic. This guy's good. If you've seen some of his stuff, he goes, "What's the discussion here?" And he's like, the person's the commentator's trying to drive a narrative or whatever, and he goes, "Is there?" And he does answers a question with a question back, which is great in media, and he says, "You tell me, is there any other genders?" And he wouldn't respond. So it's like, I think it's really, I think we need to just get back to common sense, right? And a lot of this is just common sense. You don't do a lot of this type of stuff. You balance your checkbook in your house, right? You can't, load up $1 million worth of debt when you're making $100,000 a year. And we've ended up doing a lot of crazy stuff in this country in the past handful of years. So hopefully a common sense can rule, and hopefully the majority of the American citizens have common sense. That's what I'm hoping for.
Well, the spiritual solution to the world in crisis is a common sense thought process with a God-based lifestyle and common sense. And pretty much, why couldn't you just change everything? It doesn't have to be that complicated. The thing that I go back to, and I'll make this quick because I got a little fired up there a little bit ago, is that the reality is this: we made a discussion that didn't need to be made. There's not a discussion. So we started this. We created this fictional discussion and lifestyle that didn't need to be started. Now, what you do within your gender of male or female is whatever you want to do. You can acknowledge yourself as whatever. Who cares? But we shouldn't all have to go down that road, right? We don't need to load the bus up with everybody because there's a couple people on the bus that have a different style. We welcome them on the bus. We tell them we always have a seat for you and that we love you, but we're not going to change the color of the bus because you don't like yellow. I kind of like that, Charlie. I'll tell you that.
No, I get it. Hey, I think in business and just in government, like keep it simple, stupid. You remember the KISS technique? Who was that from?
Yes,
Franklin
KISS.
Covey. KISS, keep it simple, stupid. That's like something from the 80s, right? When you add in all this layer of stuff, it drives away the mission of what needs to be done. And for the government, it's by the people, for the people, right? You're there to service the public and not some special interest group. So I think we just leave it at that. I think we need to simplify our government. It's way too many layers, way too many regulations, putting people in charge of stuff, just because. So I'm all for taking a look at doing different things. And I will say the Internal Revenue Service, what was the outside revenue service or whatever, International Revenue Service. I do think that's a creative idea because I bet you if you looked at our P&L, there's probably a lot of missed tariffs being picked up, quite frankly. So there's probably a lot of what we would call low-lying fruit out there.
I mean, The government being inefficient is not a new thing. I mean, look at the post office, regardless if you love them or you hate them. That's, I mean, what are the companies? What other company that? So why is the post office different than UPS or FedEx? Right? They got to produce income. They do, right? They have to, and they do. Well, why does the post office not? Why do they get why is it acceptable for them not to be efficient? I mean, it really isn't.
Why is the post office open on a Saturday? Why are they doing Saturday deliveries? We
Well,
don't need that anymore.
Well,
Nobody's using.
They think they got to, because then see they play like they're a business, but they're not, right? They play well, we got to be competitive with UPS and FedEx, even though when we lose money, we'll be, the government will come in and subsidize us, which is insane when you think about that. It really is crazy, but it just goes to show you that common sense and government is never the two terms that you're going to say in the same sentence. Common sense and government is never going to be that way. And that's what's interesting about hate Trump, love Trump, businessman running the government versus a politician running the government is going to be an interesting journey coming up in 2025 and on, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good topic there. Good topic. We're going to hear a lot more of that. A lot more of that discussion, I can guarantee you. Hey,
well, so is anybody investing in the USA because of Trump, do you think?
Well, that's a good jump off point there, Jay Schreck. So there's been two major investment communications that have come out, let's call it the past 48 hours. The first one was Stargate, and I'm not talking about Star Trek. It's called Stargate. And it's a partnership between, there were three people in the White House that communicated this. It's about building out data centers in AI. I think they talked about building 20 data centers, or let's call them AI factories to keep it simple here. And it's between Oracle, Larry Ellis, OpenAI, and SoftBank. Right. And then there's a couple secondaries like NVIDIA and another financial contributor to that. But they've anteed up and said over the next 4 years, they are going to spend $500 billion. Another thing that popped up last night is that Saudi Arabia is going to invest $600 billion into the United States. Now, in the past, when Trump's kind of buddied up with Saudi Arabia, it's been around weapons sale. So 600 billion seems like a lot of weapons, but those are the big two announcements. So where does this go? So there's a bigger story I want to talk about, as all these people, specifically to Stargate and let's say business people that may not have been friendly to Trump and now are just buddying up to Trump left and right. It's kind of crazy. And a lot of, let's call it, you've heard this term that's been used recently this week, oligarchies. So these are people with, either family members or business leaders specifically in this conversation that are in an inner circle, right? And they're in an inner circle and they drive all sorts of their relationship for their business or for their own interests. And I did the numbers. I love a little data here. And what we're looking at here, if you look at oligarchs, so we'll just say billionaires, not companies specific, but Trump had 52 billionaires donate to his campaign. That's a lot of billionaires, right?
That's a lot of billionaires.
A lot of billionaires. Harris campaign, which, Harris campaign brought in a truckload of money. A lot of people don't know where it went. 83. Well, Oprah's production company knows. But Harris had 83 billionaires. So that's a good chunk more billionaires than Trump. So everybody's talking about this oligarchy. For me, let's call it the oligarchs, whether it's, Musk or Zuckerberg, which is kind of crazy because he was giving a lot of money to Harris and in 180 degree, like all of a sudden we went from, people despising Trump up into the last minute, and then after the election, probably voted for the other for Harris, and then now they're just, as I would say, kissing the ring, right? It's pretty crazy, this turnaround of people that are, let's call it sucking up to President Trump. What's your take on that?
I got a question. Where biblically has this kissing of the ring come across your thought process ever, or has it? Just for example.
Well, for me, if I'm the Bible scholar here, I'm going to break this down. It kind of reminds me of David. So David beat Goliath. He was the man after God's own heart. So he, all of a sudden, he's a small guy, beats the monster, and then he's loved by the people. But then the king gets a little bit jealous, right? So then the king wants to kill David. And then David runs around, left and right, trying to do all the things to escape him dying, which, by the way, it's a crazy story. You should read it in the Old Testament. But, David's best friend was Jonathan, the king's son. And so he actually helped him evade his dad trying to kill him, the king. Long story short, as we know in the story, David comes back and he ends up being king. And you know what? I'm sure you don't hear this in the Bible, but I'm sure there were a lot of people kissing the ring of David when he came back, if you know what I mean. So I guess the moral of the stories for that specific story is, if you're faithful in God, trusting God, like, don't worry about the outcomes, just focus on what the Lord has in store for you, and amazing things will happen. You never know where you're going to go.
My story that I'm going to tell is my experience within a business that I ran, that I worked for a guy that had multiple businesses. He had probably 30, 35 businesses, right? And the business that I happened to work for was more of his toy side, right? I want to say that I own this company because I want it to be like a ring on my finger, that, it's just having something in the garage to him, right? It's not like this business, right? And so I was tasked at running this business, with it being, you got to make me look like a good guy, right? And as smart as this guy was, and I'll never deny the intelligence of this character. He was extremely investment banker that was extremely intelligent, but he was missing a little bit of common sense. And I think a lot of people mistake that people that have money, whether that be billionaires or millionaires, they mistake that these are super smart people. And I'm not saying that all of them aren't, but my experience is, as they go up the ladder, right? The craziness of these guys that are in the billionaire, we think of them as being these drivers and these power drivers that they have run this company with a flag in the mountain, right? And the truth of the matter is, a lot of these people are not that guy. They just happen to weasel themselves into a situation where all of a sudden, and I'm not saying they weren't super smart. Elon Musk there's nobody going to deny that guy is super smart, but there's nobody that would deny he's not a little different, right? This guy's a little different. He's not your normal guy. And some of these billionaires that were following these roads, they're not the guys or gals that you think they are. I have this envision of what I think a billionaire should be, and they're not that, right? They're not these guys that you think they know exactly what they want to do, when they want to do it, how they want to do it, because we built this company, right? And the truth of the matter is, they're not. A lot of these guys got no backbones. They really don't. They don't have any backbone. So they sway with whoever's in power and whoever has the ring. Zuckerberg's a weird dude, man. I'm going to throw it right out there. I'm pretty good at getting a grasp on people. I've been in sales all my life. I've been taught how to read people, all this stuff. And I don't get a read on that cat. I watched 3 hours of Joe Rogan with him, and I still don't know where he stands. I still don't get what he's about, and are they trading sides because they don't know what's going to go on? They're all afraid, I think. And it's kind of scary that I don't want anybody to have supreme power regardless of who they are. I don't want anybody to have supreme power. There needs to be a balance in there to keep things level. And that's not what we see in government anymore. Now they come in, they throw all the different policies out, and then we start new. Well, all the policies shouldn't be bad, or we've got a real problem.
It makes me think, Jeff, you've used this a lot in your life. You've signed a lot of deals, right? Physically got people to sign deals.
I have.
Would you consider yourself a deal maker? I'm sure it wasn't with a green Sharpie, but would you consider yourself a deal maker, negotiator, an expert at that, based on that? And when you think of everything Trump is doing, he positions himself, or you know this because he wrote a book on it, as the ultimate negotiator. Where do you think this oligarchy, the relationships, all the craziness goes into at the end of the day? And he wants to make a deal. He wants to succeed. He's worried about his legacy now. Is everything he is doing, is it about his legacy now?
I'm going to answer that two different ways. The first thing I'm going to answer is yes, it is all about his legacy, his ego. One advantage we might have as an American people right now is that we got a guy that knows he's at the end of the road, and he wants to be the best of the best, and he wants to be that guy. He wants to be the guy. So that's probably, hopefully, going to benefit us because he's going to do what he thinks is right. Mm-hmm. But I think it's ridiculous, though, to all of a sudden come up with this word when the world has been run like that since the beginning of time. So how are they trying to flip this script when they don't think that the Bidens and the Clintons and the Bushes were all these mega rich people that were using power and money?
I got it. Okay.
This is not new. Go to the Rothschilds, go across the pond. This is always the way it's been.
So let me ask you a question. In your head, how many deals have you had signed with a pen where you had somebody sign it? And do you think there's also an adrenaline rush when Trump gets somebody to sign and he orchestrates a deal and somebody gets that deal? Tell me about that in your experience. How many deals?
It is.
How many deals have you had?
Couple thousand.
That's a lot.
Maybe.
That's a lot of contracts, right?
Maybe somewhere in that window, because as a sales manager, as a general manager, as a finance manager, you sign a lot of papers and you're there to sell the deal, right? You're there to close the deal, not only sell it, but to close it. And the rush that you get from that is incredible. It really is, because it means that if you're a sales manager or your finance manager, that's your whole reputation on the line. You were able to convince somebody to spend their hard-earned money here at your location, and that's a rush. That's a super big rush. And now just put extra zeros at the end. They're just doing a bigger deal. But it also tells you in your own head that your road that you're on is right, that you're good, that you have value. All those things that is probably ridiculous. It feeds back into what? Ego. The thing about it, and I'm going to throw this out there. Politics is just taking a finance manager from any dealership, motorcycle, car, any RVs, doesn't matter, and giving him another 2 zeros at the end and telling him to figure out a way to manipulate a system to make it work for what you want it to work for, convince yourself and sell that package, right? That's all these guys are doing. They're just another level of a finance manager or a salesman, but they're changing the world. And if those guys don't have a moral compass, it gets pretty scary.
Yeah. Totally get that. This is our hot topic of conversation here, because this is the Finish Strong podcast, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
We're on the Finish Strong podcast. Our hot topic this week is, and this is specific to Joe Biden finishing strong. I'm not talking about his legacy. You may be talking about his legacy. Maybe it's all connected to your legacy if you're old and you're a president. But the question is did Joe Biden finish strong? So let's jump into, let me give you what Grok said
What's
about
God say?
finish strong. And I'm going to read this a little bit. So the question is, did Joe Biden finish strong? Regarded Joe Biden's performance in terms, this is subjective matter. We're not political here. It might come off a little bit sometimes, flowing back and forth. I just want to make that statement. I'm not trying to drive a narrative here. I'm just stating what Grok said. Okay. Joe's approval rating was 37%. 85% of Democrats approve. So nationally, 37%. Right. But out of that, 85% of the Democrats approved. And Joe Biden's approval rating when he entered the office was 75%. So I have some detail I'll bring back into this. Critics, this is the critics side. They may argue that Joe Biden didn't finish strong due to various policy outcomes, public approval ratings, and handling of certain issues such as the economy, foreign policy such as wars, domestic crises such as the border, right? His main point was inflation, border security, and foreign policies decision that weren't so optimal. Okay, so that's what the critics would say. The supporters, so this would be like the 85% of the Democrats, I'm sure there's some independents there, that said he did a good job. He finished strong. It said they argued that Biden managed to pass significant legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act, infrastructure investments, and initiatives on climate change. They might highlight his leadership during international crisis, his effort to efforts in vaccine distribution, and his work towards unity and democracy as strength, suggesting that he concluded his term with significant accomplishments. In summary, given the polarized nature of politics, this is up to your discretion to figure out if Joe Biden finished strong. What say you, Jay Shrek?
I don't think he finished. I don't think he finished strong. I don't think he started strong. I don't think he stayed strong. I don't think that anything. Now, here's the only thing, Charlie, being that history is a big deal to me. I love history, right? That doesn't mean that I don't know how history is going to look at Joe Biden, right? I don't know how they're going to inevitably look at that. And again, here's the problem. If I say anything bad about Joe Biden, you think that I hate him. And I don't hate Joe Biden, right? It's not, I don't know the dude, right? Just because I don't know this guy to hate him. But I know what has got me in the last years, right? What are things that I'm going to remember? Not just them. The first thing I'm going to remember is that he shuts the pipeline down as soon as he gets in, right? And just kills Pennsylvania and kills fuel. Now, when the fuel prices go up, everything grows up. There's not too many things that when something rises, that it kills everything. Everything gets transported to a location. Everything, right? So when fuel prices go up, you just raise the price on everything from food to products. Everything that you deal with went up. So the first thing he did was break our backs. That's what I felt. Okay. Then Afghanistan. What a horrible. I mean, that was the worst. The handling of the pandemic was ridiculous. He blew the world up, and because he was. And so my theory is that people are going to remember the end more than they're going to remember what I just said, right? People forget quickly. But you know what? When you go out pardoning your son, okay, so you can say, so let's give him a benefit of the doubt. Let's just say, hey, he knew that politically people were going to come after Hunter and he had to protect his son. I kind of get that. But when you blanket a whole group of people that haven't even been charged yet, and you blanket them with pardons for whatever you might do, what you're saying is that you have no respect for the government. You have no respect for yourself. You have no respect for anything that history is going to remember you on. and you have completely blown up everything. And that's the last thing people are going to remember is the last thing that you did. You can go out more like Jimmy Carter, and people eventually go back and say he was a humanitarian and all the things, and you remember more good than bad.
Yep.
But boy, when you go out thinking that that people believe that it's a crime family, and why wouldn't you? Because you've just pardoned your entire family, and so that is like he just blew himself up, and that's my opinion. And history might prove me wrong, Charlie. It has before.
I know I've known you for 20 years. That's what I'll say. You're pretty much a middle of the road independent guy. But I have noticed over the past couple years that you have been trending in, like, there's been mismanagement there. So I hear what you're saying. Just a lack of presidential leadership. So, hey, here, I'm going to bring some data into this, and we're going to play a little game here. You ready for a game?
I'm ready to go. Let's go.
Okay. So I already talked about Joe Biden's approval rating before he came in and when he left. So it triggered this idea of like, hey, I want to go back in time, and we're going to go all the way back to Jimmy Carter. So we're going to go 8 presidents back. Wow. And I ran the numbers of when the president entered in their approval rating, and then when they exited, what their approval rating is.
Interesting.
So I'll go through all 8, but I want to ask you, what do you think the top 2 presidents are? So we're going to look, this is on a scale of if they came in and it was, let's say, you started out with 50% approval rating and you ended up with 40% approval rating, you would be a negative 10. Okay. Right? You'd be a negative 10. You lost 10 points, right? So what are your 2 best presidents as far as approval rating performance before and after? And then what do you think the 2 worst are? And I'm going to just run through them by, just so you have them in your head.
Okay.
Right. We just had Joe Biden. We had Donald Trump. We had Barack Obama. We had George W. Bush. We had Bill Clinton. We had George Herbert Walker Bush. We had Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter. And we're going to stop right there because then you get into, Gerald Ford, Watergate, and all that kind of stuff. So who's your top 2, you think, where they ended in the positive?
Reagan won.
Okay.
I'm going to go Obama.
Oh, Reagan won. So what do you think he was in the positive? If you're saying Reagan won.
I'd say Reagan was 70%.
So you think he was, so plus or minus. Yes. So do you say he came in at 50 and ended at 60%? What do you think?
Plus 15.
Plus 15. Okay. Yeah. Plus 15. All right.
Yeah. Plus 15.
Okay.
The only problem with Obama
so
is
you got that,
high, but he probably left pretty close to the same, is what I'm saying with Obama. I'm saying
wait a second here. I just want to give you clarity. Right. You nailed the first one. Ronald Reagan. And I guess there's a reason why people loved Ronald Reagan. He came out plus 12. So he was the highest performer out of these presidents. And you had plus 15, man. That's within the margin of error, 3, I think. All right. Who's your number 2?
I'm going to go Obama. I'm going to go Obama plus 5.
You're going to go Obama plus 5.
Yeah. Only because I think he didn't change a lot, and he had 2 terms too. That might make a change as well.
George Herbert Walker Bush ended up being negative 2%. So the interesting thing here is there's only one president out of the past 8 presidents that actually ended on a positive alpha. So number 1 was Ronald Reagan. We talked about it. He was plus 12. He went up 12 points.
What was Obama?
Herbert Walker Bush ended up being negative 2. So that gives you a little bit plus 12, -2, Herbert Walker Bush. Now, what are your bottom two? And then I'll walk through all 8.
I would say the worst would be Jimmy Carter. I'd say he's last.
Ding, 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 ding. You
He's
nailed
last.
it. Jimmy Carter, -32. He went down 32 points.
And I would have to go Trump only because he probably left worse than he came in. And he probably didn't come in strong.
Joe Biden, -20.
I didn't even think about Biden as being like on that list, to be honest with you, because it was like, I didn't think, well, see, there's probably his finish strong right there, right? I mean, he's the worst of the last worst, right? What was Carter? What did he?
So let's go through all the. So let's go through these. Number 1 was Ronald Reagan. This is why people love him today. I didn't know. You look at the data. He came out plus 12, so he finished strong. Right, the point of this podcast. He finished strong. Herbert Walker Bush was number 2. He was -2. Since Ronald Reagan, every president approval rating went down. They finished down. They didn't finish strong. So -2 there. Number 3, Barack Obama, -9. Number 4, Donald Trump, coming in at -11.
That ain't bad considering how he left. Really?
Oh, I know. And the COVID and all that crazy stuff. Number 5, Bill Clinton, -12. And that might have had to do, you remember the Monica Lewinsky scandal? Like there was all that stuff. He didn't finish strong. He had a good first 2 years, like 4 years. And then his presidency was kind of a mess at the end. Didn't finish strong. No finish strong. Number 6 would be George W. Bush, -17. Now he got us in, well, I mean, hindsight 2020, right? 9/11, the wars, all that stuff that hurt his rating. He was -17. And then number 7, Joe Biden, -20. That's a big number. He's -20. And then our good friend, and president that I think everybody would agree had a better ending. So Jimmy Carter did finish strong. He did more outside of his presidency afterwards.
Right. I
think a lot of people say that. He was a pretty nice guy. He was -32. So as far as his polling numbers, I think he finished strong personally, but as far as a politician, that's a complete disaster.
You know, there's a lot of his history when it comes to popularity of presidents. And during the Civil War, one thing that happened during the Civil War, not a lot of people care about my history stuff, but one of the things that happened after the war was that the South had a big propaganda push to make Lee a lot more popular than Grant, even though he was a losing general at that time. And they made him more popular than Grant at one time because of the propaganda that they pushed after the war. And they really did a big job to try to have people remember Lee being more than Grant. So, you know, when it comes to this stuff, a lot of times it's politicized as well. But you know, I'm not too happy with. I mean, there's not a lot of guys in that list that you know. Let's cut to the chase. So what do you think about on a daily basis? You know, hey, if your party gets in and your party doesn't get in, right? You still got to survive the next 4 years. And I don't care who you are, right? You have to survive it. And I've always figured out a way, even if my candidate didn't get in, to figure out there's a positive and I'm going to survive it anyway. And I'm God-based, so I'm going to be okay. But, you know, there's so many things that they could just do to make it simple. Leave my 401k alone. If my 401k is moving forward, then you know what? You're probably doing the right thing. And keep fuel and prices down low enough where we can survive it regardless of who's in there. And that's what he failed to do. He failed to keep the prices down. He failed to. Barack Obama, I'll remember him as the guy that killed my 401k. He might have been the sweetest talker and the nicest guy, and I'm sure he killed my 401k. And I'll never forget that. And again, I didn't think about like what he did or what he didn't do. You know, the guy was the greatest talker of all, But it just shows you that
Great communicator.
if there's no substance, though, right? Then it's not, doesn't mean he's going to end up being the most popular president. And we don't even want to get into the bushes. I'm so, I feel like they sold me down the river, if you want to know the truth, with the bushes. I still think we're going to find out a lot more about that family somewhere down the road, and it's going to be horrible.
Well, here's my take on this before we shift topics here. Did Joe Biden finish strong? The numbers say no. I personally think that has to do with his leadership and in his current state. So I don't know mentally and all that type of stuff. But he was known as a good guy, a deal maker, likable, and it just seemed like he just turned into a different person. And I don't know, the stress, age, all that stuff came down, and he totally didn't finish strong because the majority of the American public, which voted against Harris, but really it was a vote against my feeling. It was a vote against Biden and Harris. It wasn't just Harris because not too many people knew like all the things, right? She didn't talk a lot about specifics. And because of that, he didn't finish strong in the eyes of the American public, and he ended up as the 7th worst president going back close to 50 years from an approval rating. So I'll just leave it at that. Hey, let's shift gears right here. Our final topic, Jeff. So we're going to talk about personal stuff. And I was thinking, I always ask Gronk. Last week we had this really cool mystery topic. We talked about what songs you like in between sets if you're at a concert. I thought that was a really good one. If you want to go back in that pod, I really like my selections. And you just talked about bands. I will hold you accountable that you didn't give me a lot of specifics on that. But being the guitar guy and music guy that you are. So the finish strong topic of the week is I asked Gronk this, so I'm going to lead this out with Grok. It's Grok, not Gronk, not like the football player. It's Grok. Yeah, it's tough. I want to say Gronk like the football player, but so what is the most important lesson that you learned this week to finish strong? And specifically, what are the habits? One habit, right, that allows you to finish strong. So here's what Grok said. Grok said adaptability, accountability, self-discipline, gratitude. And out of all these personal characteristics and habits, Grok said adaptability, which I thought was very interesting, which makes me think that with an incoming president, with all this stuff going on, that we all need to maybe shift gears a little bit and be more adaptive, more open-minded, more patriotic American, give all our new elected officials, give them a break, and let politics aside and see where we go as a company, say I'm a company guy, as a country for, let's say, the next 6 months. Let's not, as American citizens, get caught into all the news that's coming out. So that's my summary of him. But I want to tell a story before I hand it off to you. So I was thinking about virtues, and I think I had a friend. I was having a conversation with this individual that's going through tough times, about my age, and his parents, he's really tight with them, going through tough times. And he's kind of stepped in the gap, and he's wearing this. And then he's asking God, why has this happened? And he's got a long history of stuff he's dealt with and battled with and engages with to help other people. Really, really solid guy. And so I started thinking about, and I started asking him, like, hey, tell me, like, what do you do during your day? Like, I broke it down simple. He's telling me, pouring out his guts, saying all this stuff. And I said, well, what are you doing? Like in your day, you wake up, like, what are you doing every day? And he said he spends the first hour in scripture, prayer, meditation. And I was like, when I listened to him, I was like, wow. I'm like, here's this individual going through like all this negative, all this chaos, right? And he's trying to finish strong, but he's got this self-discipline driven by what I call a fortress of faith, right? In the midst of a storm of chaos. So there's this discipline he has in the morning, and I wrote this down, is creating a fortress, a force field, right, to protect him through the day, right? And he does this every day, and that's helping him get through the day amidst all this chaos in his life. And he's giving it to God. But it's one thing to pray and then give it to God and then go through all the emotions as a human being of negativity and chaos that you're not as you as an individual. And he's in a blended marriage too. Like, and then he's trying to use that to keep him focused to finish strong. So that's my feedback based on this individual. I thought it was really cool, and I encouraged him to keep doing that and not break that spiritual discipline every morning.
I have to agree with you. The thing I would tell anybody, because I have a lot of people that the first thing they'll say to you is that, well, how can God do this to a child? How can God do this to this person or that person, right? And my theory is this: we have free will. We have free will to be able to marry whoever we want to. We have free will to do what we want to do, whether it be good or bad. And that's part of this, right? It's important that we have free will to do what we want to do, when we want to do it, how we want to do it. The problem with that free will is that sometimes that gets us in situations. I am just a product of blended relationships throughout the world of my family. And along with that came the weaknesses, physical. I'll never forget my doctor when I had a heart problem. The first thing he asked me was, well, does heart problems run in your family? And I said, no. Then he looked at me and said, well, then you don't have an heart problem. You're not going to generate that yourself. This is going to come from your heritage, right? And so weaknesses come like that, right? So it's not God punishing any one person. It's me in that scenario taking whatever responsibility there is and however there is of what's going to happen. See, I don't know what the end result actually is. I have a belief on what I think, right? But being relieved of this earth might be the greatest thing ever, or the worst. I don't know, right? I don't know that. I know I have a faith. And so how do I live that? What's the most important thing I can do today to live in a balanced world, in a world of chaos? And that is service. I believe that the most important thing that any of us do is we're of service. And that because one thing happens magically when you're in service is you're not in self. So when I go to service, I'm out of self. And so what's the biggest problem I deal with? Self-centeredness, right? That's my Achilles heel, is that, well, what about me? And what about this? Well, if I'm worried about you more than I am me, well, then guess what? And so I do believe the discipline of getting up every morning and meditating, that is what I do every day. And I turn my life and my will over to the care of God, right? And then throughout the day, when I get off base, I ask him to focus me back and get going. And realizing too, that I'm not living in yesterday's world or tomorrow's. God is with me right at this moment today. He's not tomorrow because it's not here. And he's not yesterday because it's over. And you know what? Regardless of who the president is, I've always lived that way. And I've always looked at regardless, there's something I can benefit from whatever group is in office at that time, right? Even though I might have a personal feeling one way or another, the truth of the matter is, what can I do for my fellow man, right? What can I do for somebody in need, right? And if I'm doing that, then I don't have to worry about, and gas has been ridiculous and I've complained about it, but you know what? I'm still standing here. I don't look any worse for wear, even though I might complain about the price of food and all that. I'm still standing here. And whether it goes up or it goes down, that's not going to change what I'm personally going to do in the direction to finish strong personally myself.
Love it.
Is it.
I love it.
So, again, I have a responsibility to live my life in a moral way, regardless of what the world does. And, let's be frank. It's God versus the devil. It's always been that. It's still that. It's going on today. And these guys are just getting swayed. I've told people a million times, if I ever sat across the table like Joe Rogan did, for example, and somebody said, "Hey, Jeff, here's $111 million. I've never had that experience, so I can't judge anybody. I'm not saying Joe Rogan did bad. I'm just saying that, I can't, these guys in Hollywood, these guys in Washington, they're getting thrown all this money and this temptation. And man, how difficult would that be in that world? I come home and I tell Deanna, my wife, hey, I just turned down $7 million because they didn't want me to do X. And she would look like my head's on fire, even though she would probably then adjust to it and say, okay. But I mean, who wouldn't go, all of a sudden you have everything you ever thought you needed and there you are. And so, I understand that I can't be mad at these people, but that's what it is. They're just getting paid off, regrettably. They're just getting paid off. But you can't take that with you. There's no U-Hauls going to the cemetery with all your goodies in it, I don't think.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And I agree with you 100%. The only way you can get rid of your self-centeredness or one of the number one ways is to serve other people, because now you're not focused on yourself, you're focused on somebody else. And if you don't have that habit of service, and service in many different ways, we could talk about this in another conversation, but like service can be just picking up the phone, calling somebody because they're going through a difficult time, right? I think serving has to be strategic. Some people, first off, some people are great at service. Like they're helpers, they're helper personality. They want to jump all in. Like that's in their DNA. But I would say that might be 7% of the population, maybe 10% of the population, maybe 15, somewhere around there. And that's when I say service, that's more from a helping spirit. They get their energy out of helping people. So that's a personality type. I can go through the Enneagram, all sorts of different types of personality type. That's the number 2. I have a little bit of that in me. I'm more of a performer, a 3, but I do have the 2 in me. But forget about your personality type. Like service. And when I say service, I'm talking about not serving your own self-centered needs, which a lot of people view service as like, hey, I'm working, I'm serving my wife, I'm serving my kids. Occasionally I serve my parents, like kind of that, like you were talking about blocks, like that's your block of service. Oh, whoa. And
how does that happen?
So if that,
can I do that?
Is that your block of service?
I don't have that. I don't get them hearts. What's up
I love
with
you,
that?
Jeff. I love you, Jeff. If that's your block of service, that's not really service. Really, that is what you have to do. That should not be an option, right? That should be a parental responsibility, a son, a daughter responsibility. Like if you can't take care of your family, if you can't engage with your family, like that needs to be taken care of. That step, right? And then, right, right, you're right there. I'm just saying from a moral compass perspective, right? You just need to be right there. But where you get out of your self-centeredness is to serve others where you don't have a personally invested, gain. That is how you get rid of your self-centeredness. And I think that's what you were saying. But I wanted to give clarity around your immediate family.
Well,
If you but wait, if you have issues with that side, you might want to take care of that first as a first block, a first step, and then move on to other people, or do all of them at the same time. What do you think, Jeff?
well, doing what you're supposed to do is not service. You're supposed to be comforting to your family. You're supposed to go to work. You're supposed to provide for them. You're supposed to be loving. All that stuff that's not service. That's responsibility as being a grown male or a grown female, right? Service is outside of that circle to me, right? That's what I do outside of what I'm supposed to do. Sometimes people will pat me on the back because I went to work. Well, we're all supposed to go to work. Well, pat me on the back because I did this. Well, you're supposed to do that, right? And sometimes people think that that's supposed to be the bonus, and that's not the bonus. The basic stuff that you're supposed to do is what you have a responsibility. I'll use it as a male being a male, right? I have a responsibility to do that and to be that, right? That's just what I'm supposed to do. It's outside of that window of service to others in your community, whether that be in church or whether that be the guy down the street. And, a lot of times doing the right thing is just what you're supposed to do. I'm not supposed to be patted on the back because I went to Quick Trip and I told the guy that it was a refill instead of a regular. It's not like I'm supposed, look at me because I told him it was a new cup, right? That's just what I'm supposed to do. That's not supposed to be, well, look at me, God, I'm so special. I didn't take an extra $1 out of their pocket today. So, that's the misconception as well. I'll put it at that.
That's good stuff.
So there we are. Has this podcast ended, Charlie? Is that where we're at?
Yeah, I think we're in it. It's really good. I really appreciate this conversation. I think we got we got a little bit deep here, and that was really, really good around finishing strong and doing the right thing.
Well, and again, that's the thing about it is that, even as a president, I'm not supposed to be, patted on the back for doing what I'm supposed to do. This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm not supposed to, this is not something above and beyond, hey, I'll finish with this and I'll shut up. I work for God. I don't work for whatever company. I work for God. And so how I represent myself is how I represent my employer, and that's God. And I do what I'm supposed to do, regardless of where I go or what I do. That's who I am. My employer is God. It's not UPS or wherever because I've been everywhere, right? So if I remember that and I do God's work, then I don't have to worry about if I'm doing the right thing or the right job or whatever, because, I've been given a gift, and that gift is to live this life. And I appreciate the fact I get to do that on a daily basis. I get to be of service. And I'll finish with that.
Amen, brother.
Amen. Adios, amigos.